Storytelling, I believe, is the most powerful skill that you as a founder, entrepreneur can master for growing your business. The ability to communicate your message in a way that's captivating, that's compelling, that's impactful to your team, to your partners, to your customers. It's a definitive advantage. You look at the people who've built the most successful, awesome, badass businesses. It's all around stories. But how do we tell great stories? That's the big question. Now, what I want to talk about in this video is the number one storytelling mistake that I see and how you can fix it. And this is really apropos, really top of mind right now because I am working on a book with my buddy, Molly, who runs an awesome YouTube channel. It's called The Story Bible. It's all around helping people learn how to tell their stories better. And in the process of writing this, I've been doing a lot of research. I'm looking at different storytelling frameworks from cinema, from literature, from Steve Jobs on a stage, giving a keynote, right? How do we tell stories in all its different permutations? And I came across this YouTube video the other day by this gentleman named Matt Wong. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, by the way, Matt. Great YouTube channel. Recommend you go find him. Never talked to him before. The only video I've ever watched was this one around storytelling. He talks about this video called Storytelling 101. And this is a video where he's ostensibly teaching you how to tell better stories. He does a fantastic job. However, he makes the biggest mistake that I see people make when it comes to telling stories. And so I want to point this out. And I know a thing or two about telling stories because if you guys don't know, my background is like in a previous life, I wrote nearly a dozen science fiction and fantasy novels, published a bunch of those, wrote a nonfiction book that was really heavily around story and how it pertains to raising capital for real estate. So you figure how do those things go together, right? And then I get paid regularly $10,000 to $15,000 to give keynotes on the biggest stages in the world around storytelling. So I know a couple things on this topic. And this is, in my experience, the number one mistake that people make when it comes to telling a story, and the reason why your stories fall flat, why they're not super memorable, why they might be entertaining, but they don't necessarily resonate and stick with people. So let me give you the example through the lens of a story that Matt told. Now, Matt was doing a very good job. I'm not like poo-pooing on him at all. That's not this. But this is a very common mistake. He told a story just off the top of his head. I don't know how much time and energy he put into this. It was effectively like, I was with my friend walking down the street in New York City when out of nowhere, this person comes up behind me. They grab my bag off of my shoulder and they take off running. I go after him, but after a block, I lose him in the people. And I'm like super frustrated, right? So then I come back, I go to the police, I file a report, but unfortunately they're like, listen, this happens all the time. The likelihood that we're going to get your bag back is incredibly low. So I'm sorry for that. Well, he goes home and then a couple days later out of the blue, he gets a phone call from a guy who saw him get mugged and saw the guy run off, and he took off after the guy, the stranger that he never knew. He took off after the guy, got the bag back, and then called Matt to return the bag. And so huzzah, he got his bag back after all this stuff, right? So that's effectively the story that he told. Guy in New York City walking down the street, gets more or less mugged. Guy takes his bag, tries to do something by going to the police, nothing happens, but then is saved at the end of the day by a stranger who returns the bag. Cool. So the grand storytelling mistake that people typically make is they focus on the external events. They tell the external what happened. They say, the guy came up, took the bag, ran off. I chased after him, couldn't get him. So then I went and did this, and then I went and did this. The external story is what the hero does. Like the actual thing that you see on the screen, right? It's Luke Skywalker going and flying through the tunnel and then just firing the missile, right? It's the Frodo going across Mordor and then throwing the ring in the fire. It's the physical action you can see on screen. It's the whiz bang boom. This is the part that makes the story entertaining. And this is why most people only fixate on this, because when we're telling stories, we are simply, in a lot of cases, we're just reciting the visual we have inside of our brain of what's happening on the screen. We're just telling people, here's what's happening on the screen in my brain. But when you do that and you only focus on the external, you're left with a story that might make people laugh, it might make people cry, but they're probably not really going to remember it in the grand scheme of things. Because you fast forward 2 weeks from now and I'm like, hey, do you remember that story I told you about the guy in New York? You're like, yeah, didn't he get like mugged or something like that? I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happened. It was like, yeah, people get mugged in New York all the time. It's a dangerous place. Don't go to New York, right? That would be the lesson. You'd probably walk away from there. But the thing that makes stories impactful, that makes them resonant, that makes people feel something and then like actually walk away having learned something is what we call the second story within the story. So the first story is the external, the what happened. The second story, the story within a story, is the internal story. And the internal story is why it mattered and how you felt as you were navigating the external event. Because a story is fundamentally about transformation. A lot of times we make the mistake of thinking the transformation is the external transformation of Luke firing the torpedo. But that's not actually the transformation that Luke went through. If you remember, if you rewind a couple seconds in that movie, right? It's not, the transformation isn't he did the heroic thing and blew up the Death Star. The transformation was he turned off the ship's guidance system and trusted in the Force. He gave up control. And that's something that you can't see that per se on the screen. It happened through exposition and you can kind of see him close his eyes and they explain what's happening, right? But it's the internal struggle, the reason the hero is compelled to go and do the thing in the first place, why they have to go and blow up the Death Star. And then the transformation internally that occurs in pursuit of that thing. And you'll notice that all the greatest stories, they always have a great external stuff is happening, but then it's also paired with a great internal story of the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is largely happening internally. So here's how this might look a little bit different if you were just to kind of layer in the internal story on top of Matt's getting mugged in New York story. The internal story would be more, this guy ran up behind me, grabbed the bag off my shoulder. I chased after him, and after it was all done, I was just like, my adrenaline was pumping, and I felt both just so frustrated, and I felt stupid. I felt vulnerable, and like I'd been taken advantage of. And I'll be honest, like I was a little bit scared. I was a little bit on edge after that. Like every single person I looked at, I was like, I just saw them differently. And then I went to the police and I laid out what happened here. And these people who I thought were there to protect and serve, they didn't really have any sympathy. They're kind of like, yeah, bummer. This happens 100 times a day. And I get it from their perspective. They just see it so frequently. But for me, it was very traumatic and there was nothing they could do. And so I felt hopeless. I felt like there was just nothing I could do. And so I went home, and for like the next week, it kept playing over and over and over in my mind. Every time I'd see a person, I'd get this spike of anxiety, this spike of fear. Like, are they going to hurt me? Are they going to do something? Right. And it really started to affect how I think about other people. Like I used to think of myself as happy-go-lucky, but now I'm just distrustful of every single person. If anybody knocked on the door, every time my phone rang, I was just like on edge constantly. But then I get this phone call out of nowhere, like 2 weeks later, from a guy I've never met. And he's like, "Are you Matt?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, I have your wallet. I was like, what do you mean you have my wallet? And he's like, well, he explains, like, I saw you get mugged. I saw the guy run off with your bag. And so I took off after him on my bike. And I caught him like 3 blocks later and I got your bag back. And your ID was in here. And so I tried to figure out what your phone number was, but it took me a little bit of figuring it out. And like I stalked you on social media. But I finally got a hold of you. And I was like, in that moment, I don't know what it was. It just changed everything. I went from this feeling like everybody was like a danger. They were my enemy. Like something could happen to realizing, no, there's actually a lot of good in the world. In fact, most people are good in the world. Most people I cross on the street have never mugged me. Right. And so instead of focusing on that side, I was like, and saying humanity is dark and evil and bad, it's like, oh no, humanity's great. Like people are great. And so that's a story right now. Here's the thing is you'll notice when you tell the internal story, that's a lot longer of a story, isn't it? It's a lot longer than just reciting events. But the thing is, nobody's life has ever been transformed by reciting a chronology of events. Nobody's life. The thing that you will probably relate to when you hear that story, if you've ever gone through something like that, you will empathize and be like, I totally understand that feeling of helplessness, that feeling of vulnerability, and how that, like, despite your best efforts, it kind of like, it becomes part of you, right? And then the flip of that is the hope, the transformation. And that's the transformative power of story right there, where you can get the lesson without the trauma. You don't have to get mugged to come out the other side and feel the vulnerability that I felt when I got mugged. And you don't have to get mugged and then hopefully have a hero return the bag to you in the future for you to come out the other side feeling like there's hope for humanity yet, right? That's the power of a great story. And so what I would encourage you to think about whenever you're telling stories isn't just what happened, but what did you feel? Why did it matter? Tell that part of the story. Focus more on that part of the story rather than the sequence of events. And I promise people will, one, they will remember your stories. Number two, they will feel more connected to you. And three, they will remember the story. It'll be more deeply resonant for them. So take that, run with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you like this type of content, leave a comment down below. We'll do more on storytelling. If you want to get on the wait list for the Story Bible, it's probably not going to come out until 2026, but leave a comment down below. We'll grab your email from that, and then we'll send you a message when the project is coming closer to launch. Otherwise, go be awesome and make a great story, but then tell it really good.